Hello everyone. Financial success has little to do with your intelligence and a lot to do with your behavior. Have you ever wondered how it is that a person with a lot of academic achievement ends up less wealthy than others who don't even have an education? Human behavior is a key variable in financial performance. Whether it's something as large as a country's economy or something as small as your personal finances. But at the same time, it is the most difficult aspect to analyze and understand. In this video, I'm going to summarize the most important chapters from a book called The Psychology of Money, written by Morgan Housel. Chapter 1. No one is crazy. The idea we have of how the world and money work has little to do with what actually happens in the world and a lot to do with what you believe about it. And what you think about how the world works is heavily influenced by your personal experience, and your personal experiences depend on your immediate context. For example, it is very likely that someone who lives in a country with an inflationary crisis has had negative experiences with saving and, therefore, needs to spend everything they earn as soon as possible. In contrast, another person who lives in a country with a stable currency thinks differently about saving and has a more optimistic view of saving. Thus, two people of equal intelligence may differ on how to save and invest money to multiply wealth. An average professional living in Australia before the pandemic crisis could not really understand people living in other latitudes who have experienced many economic crises in their lives. You can know the numbers and analyze the data and statistics, but you will never have the personal experience. Every decision people make with their money is justified by the information they have at the time and tied to their unique mental model of how the world works. It seems we all do crazy things with our money, but no one is crazy. Our money decisions are based on unique experiences that can only make sense to us at any given time. Chapter 2, Chance and Risk. If you ask successful businessmen how they became successful, they will surely tell you about hard work and a lot of sacrifice. That's how they'll explain their success. And while this is true for them, the flip side of the coin is that there are untold and unseen variables that can be decisive. Luck and risk. The results you achieve in your life will be governed by forces beyond your individual effort. Don't get me wrong, this doesn't mean you shouldn't try. It means that effort is not the only ingredient for success. For example, many people talk about the business success and innovation of Bill Gates. There are even those who use him as an example to follow. But Bill Gates went to Seed, an elite private school in Seattle. It was the only school to have a computer in the 1960s, the Model 33 TV. This greatly influenced Bill Gates' interest in computers. He even got permission to quit math classes so he could pursue his interest in computers. Bill Gates himself admitted that if he had not been able to study at a computer school like Lakeside, there would have been no Microsoft. Gates was not the only bright student at the school. With him were Paul Allen and Kent Evans. They were friends. You would have thought that all three were destined for success. But when Evan died prematurely in an accident before graduating, as you can see, there were defining events in their destinies that were not in their control. We see the results, but we don't see the complexity behind them. This is also the case with risk. We are not able to measure the risks that large investors have assumed. We don't know how much risk that investor has assumed with this company that is successful today. We don't know how much debt that successful businessman incurred by betting on the future when he started his business. This is not a simple problem. The difficulty in identifying what is due to luck, what is due to skill, and what is due to risk, is one of the biggest problems we face when trying to learn the best way to decide our money. The author gives 3 lessons we can learn from this reality. 1. Not all success is due to hard work and not all failure is due to laziness. Keep this in mind when you judge others and when you judge yourself. 2. Don't look at the exceptional cases and don't take extreme examples. The more exceptional the result, the less applicable it is, because extreme results are very likely to have been influenced by extreme cases of luck or risk. 3. Nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. Assuming the role that luck and risk play in the outcomes we achieve will help us forgive ourselves and leave room to keep trying until the game is in our favor. Chapter 3: Never enough when rich people do crazy things. Many people want to become rich, but it is still very abstract. How rich do you want to get? How much is enough? A party held on Shelter Island by a billionaire was attended by two writers, Kurt Vonnegut and Joseph Heller. Vonnegut points out that the billionaire makes more money in a single day than she made from her novel. But she replies, yes, but I have something he can never have enough of. There is a danger in never having enough. People can have it all: wealth, valuable possessions, power. But they can also take a risk and throw it all away because they wanted more. The author tells the story of Rajat Gupta, who was orphaned as a teenager but years later earned an MBA at Harvard and became the CEO of McKinsey & Company in 2008. The value of his wealth would have been $100 million, but Gupta wanted more and he proved it in 2008, during the Goldman Sachs crisis. Warren Buffett decided to invest $5 billion in the bank to help it survive. As Gupta was a member of the board of directors of Goldman Sachs, he got this information before the public. So he decided to secretly agree to buy Goldman Sachs shares before they went up because of Buffett's investment. Gupta was arrested for insider trading. This is how he ruined his reputation and career, motivated by the greed of never having enough. In this chapter, the author leaves some important lessons. 1. The most difficult financial skill is to make the goal stop slipping away. The goal is set further and further away when the taste for more wealth and power grows faster than the satisfaction. And that's a red flag that you're probably about to take more and more risks irrationally. True happiness is in the satisfaction of having enough, not in the constant waiting. 2. Social comparison is the problem. Comparing yourself to others is an unnecessary torture that you should avoid. There will always be someone who performs better than you. There will always be someone higher on the ladder. Comparing yourself to them will steal your joy. Run your own race. And 3. There are many things that are not worth the risk. Whatever the potential gain, reputation is priceless. Freedom and independence are priceless. Family and friends are priceless. Being loved by those you love is priceless. Happiness is priceless. If you want to keep it all with you, you need to know when to stop taking risks that can harm all these precious things. Chapter 4: Confounding Compounds. There are many books on investing, many of them very good, such as the ones about how Warren Buffett made his fortune through investing. Today, Buffett's fortune is $86.5 billion. There is no doubt that he is a phenomenal investor, but there is one thing that should be kept in mind. Buffett isn't just a good investor, he's been one since he was a kid. As a result, over 90% of his assets were accumulated after he turned 50. Warren Buffett's skill is investing, but his secret is time. That's how compounding works. The lesson the author wants to teach in this chapter is that to invest well, you don't necessarily have to get the highest returns. The highest returns tend to be one-time successes that cannot be repeated. Good investing is about getting fairly good returns that you can keep and that can be repeated over a long period of time. And as Charlie Munger said, the first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. Chapter 5: Getting Rich versus Staying Rich. Many financial gurus talk about how to get rich, which has made it a boring topic for many people. But there is another thing that is often lost sight of. It's not just about accumulating a certain amount of capital, but maintaining your wealth over time. The author states that there is only one way to stay rich, a combination of frugality and paranoia. Frugality is about using your resources wisely. To get rich, you have to take risks, be optimistic about the future, and market yourself to stay rich. You have to be humble and afraid that what you have earned will be taken away or lost. Compound interest is like planting a tree. In 1 year you won't see much progress, saying you'll notice the difference, and in 50 years you'll have created something extraordinary. But to stay on your feet for all that time, you have to survive the ups and downs of life that we all experience over time. Chapter 6: You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. In this chapter, the author tells the story of Heinz Berggruen, who was admired for his acumen in investing in art. Berggruen managed to amass a collection of valuable artworks, but in reality, it was not pure acumen. But Berggruen bought large quantities of art, and all of it. Only a small portion became valuable art. This means that Berggruen was wrong most of the time, but still managed to be right. If you want to venture into the world of entrepreneurship and investing, you need to understand that many things in the world follow the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule. Experienced investors and large companies expect that out of 100% of their investment decisions, 80% will fail. If you see something that does extraordinarily well or becomes famous and influential, you need to understand that it is an event in the thousands or millions. This is the case with the stock market. Most will fail, some will do well, and only a few will generate incredible returns. According to the author, Warren Buffett admitted to owning shares in more than 400 different companies during his lifetime. But the biggest gains came from only 10 of them. Many large companies understand this fact of life. For example, if you review all the series Netflix has produced, you'll see that only a few of them have been significantly successful. When you become aware of this, you can accept that it is normal for many things to fail or go wrong. Chapter 7: Freedom. In this chapter, the author tells how he once wanted to become an investment banker because he was making a lot of money and thought he would be happy once he worked at it. When he succeeded in working as an investment banker, he understood from day one why he was making a lot of money. He worked harder and for longer hours. More control than any human being could handle. The author says that although he felt important in this job and was well paid, there came a time when he could no longer stand being a slave to his boss, because he was forced to work every second of the day. This made for the most miserable days of his life. He was unable to work like this for over a month. Working on something you love to do for hours on end, that you can't control, can turn into something you hate. No matter how much you love your activity, if it turns into something that takes over your time, you will end up hating it. The highest form of wealth is the ability to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want. Today, we hear people say all the time that they want to be happy. But happiness is complex because we are all different. But there is a common denominator. The universal fuel of joy is the ability to control your own life. There are enticing opportunities to make money, but many are traps that can be difficult to escape. Don't fall into the endless cycle of earning more while losing one of your most precious values, freedom. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want, for as long as you want, is priceless. Chapter 9, Wealth is what you don't see. Someone may look rich, but it's impossible to be sure. At first glance, you may only see the tip of the iceberg. Don't be tempted by those who flaunt their wealth. It sounds silly to say it, but the only way to accumulate wealth is not to spend it. Often when people say they want to be millionaires, what they really mean is that they want to spend $1 million. But spending $1 million is literally the opposite of being a millionaire. Wealth is hidden, wealth is income that is saved and not spent. Wealth is option, quality, flexibility, and growth. Wealth is the ability to buy things if necessary. Spending money to show others how much money you have is the fastest way to have less. Chapter 13, The Margin for Error. If you are not able to imagine, the possibility of your failure would fail you. For the real failure will come when you don't know how to deal with a setback in your entrepreneurship and investments. How do you deal with adversity? If you have never considered the possibility, or if you have not prepared for it, putting all your eggs in one investment basket means you are taking too much risk by focusing on one option. If you don't broaden your investment portfolio, it means you leave no room for error. In other words, you won't be prepared for an unfavorable outcome, and that's the real failure. If something can break, it will break. So if you make many things depend on the performance of one, you are counting down the days to disaster. One of the biggest mistakes with money is relying solely on salary to fund short-term expenses, without savings, to protect you from unexpected expenses in the future. We like to think that we are saving for something certain, like buying a car or retirement. But the reality is that we don't know what will happen tomorrow, and we can't be sure how we'll spend our savings. That doesn't mean we shouldn't plan, but that we should leave a margin for error when planning. Chapter 14, Will you change? Planning for the long term seems easier than it really is, because everything changes over time. You and I will change in 10 years, the world will change too. This should not be a barrier to making plans for the future, but a warning to help you do so with the caution and wisdom to avoid future regrets. The author tells the story of a friend who, as a teenager, always said he dreamed of being a doctor. At the time, it was easy to conclude that he wouldn't make it, but he did with great effort. A few years ago, the author met again with this friend who is now a doctor. But it turns out that this friend, who fought for his dream of becoming a doctor, regretted choosing this career, saying that it was horrible. In psychology, there is a phenomenon called the end-of-story illusion. This is what psychologists call the tendency of people to be acutely aware of how much they have changed in the past, but to underestimate how much their personality, desires, and goals are likely to change in the future. The reality is that you will change. You will never stop doing it. The same is true of your context. It will change, and decisions that seemed right in the past may end up not making sense in the future. Think about this when it comes to long-term financial planning. Chapter 15, Nothing is free, everything has a price, but not all prices are on the label. Determining what that price is, and if you're willing to pay it, what is the price of success, is critical to making financial decisions. Are you willing to pay it before you make a decision? Do you think that most things are easier in theory than in practice to succeed as an investor, or you will have to pay a price, but you will not pay that price with money, you will pay it with the uncertainty, doubt, and fear associated with market volatility. Your investment income is not free and never will be. Volatility and uncertainty are the cost of admission and the cost of doing business in this world. The key is to accept it and consider it as part of the market, and convince yourself that the price is worth it, of course. Do you want to start something? Find out what the price is and pay it. Chapter 16. You and I have different agendas, and our agendas are designed from our worldview, guided by our own motivations. Take this as a warning when following the advice or footsteps of others. In history, many financial bubbles have occurred, causing immeasurable damage to the wealth of many investors by ruining entire families. The common denominator of all financial bubbles is that investors innocently follow the signals of other investors who are playing a different game from them and inevitably fall into a trap. Long-term investors and short-term investors have different agendas. Be careful when making investment decisions based on someone else's steps. With this in mind, the author recommends doing everything possible to identify the game you are playing. Every investor should choose a strategy that has the best chance of achieving his or her goals. Chapter 17. The Seduction of Pessimism. Have you noticed that many people seem to be very interested in the tragic messages of the doomsayers? It is as if people like to hear that the world is going to hell. Pessimism is the order of the day. That's because pessimism seems smarter. The author mentions The Faith or the Wall Street Journal published an article written by a named Russian professor. The article sounded like the synopsis of a dystopian movie, literally warning that by 2010, the United States of America would be divided. Alaska would come under Russian control, California would become the California Republic and be under Chinese influence, and so on. More apocalyptic prophecies. This article was incredibly published on the front page of such a prestigious newspaper. Pessimism is natural and evolutionary, since organisms that treat threats as something urgent are more likely to survive and reproduce. However, optimism is the best bet for most people, as the world has always tended to get better for most people most of the time. The reality is that the desire to survive and the pursuit of profit drive people to seek solutions in the face of adversity and necessity. Innovation will emerge, because necessity is the mother of all innovation. Imagine you were in Japan a few days after being destroyed by defeat in World War II, and you read an article stating that Japan will become one of the world's leading economies. What would you think? Maybe you would believe it, or maybe you would see it as an optimistic cliché, but it turned out to be true. Japan has managed to recover and become a world power after hitting rock bottom, as you can see. Sooner or later, solutions appear as a people's response to problems and adversities. Optimism is one of the key drivers of economic recovery, often ignored by pessimists. Without optimism, it is impossible for people to create solutions to problems. This concludes the summary of the book, The Psychology of Money. You will find the link of the book below this video.